Hello, whisky fans. Welcome to The Whisky Bothy with me, the whisky enthusiast. My name's Ralphie. I review whisky, and I've been reviewing whisky for quite a while and drinking whisky for even longer. And I'm currently engaged in a series of more available standardised whiskies. Now, I feel I should be giving you an explanation as what I mean by standardised. I mean that these are recognisable, widely available, readily accessible whiskies, Scotch whiskies, primarily single malt whiskies, which have got a reasonable reputation and a good pedigree historically. And they're widely available internationally, unlike quite a number of independent bottlings and small distillery bottlings that I've been featuring at the beginning of the year, simply because I really want to enjoy what I'm reviewing and I don't want to bring you too much bad news. However, here in review number 1128, I'm going to review Tamdhu 12-year-old single malt, readily accessible, readily available, bottled at 43. Could you excuse me a second? Where is it? Here it is. Bottled at 43%, chill filtered, bit of caramel colouring in it. Well, why not? Why wouldn't they? Because, you know, if a whisky looks darker, it must be better for those who don't know enough about whisky. There's a lot to learn about whisky, and if you're not prepared to do the apprenticeship and to gather a lot of online information and have a lot of online conversation, check out an assortment of reviews and ideally get yourself along to a whisky festival. You're really going to be stuck at the start line with what we call the travel retail bottlings, which are generally homogenised, flavour controlled. I'm being tactful here. Flavour controlled constructions for people who don't want a lot of flavour. Right. So they're kind of safe tastes. So if you're looking for a safe taste, you're looking for mainstream brands. That's what you'll generally find. Not always, there are an exception. My next review, number 1129, will be covering one notable exception. But in the meantime, we're going to Speyside, to a place called Knockando, which is noted for having Knockando Distillery and Knockdhu Distillery. And it has this Tamdhu distillery. For quite a long time, overlooked and underrated, because this was primarily producing sherry-style single malts for sherry-style blends. And it's doing a pretty good job. As regards the signature of Tamdhu, I would put it up there with Longmorn, with Dalmore, when Dalmore's actually getting it right. I don't want to say too much about Dalmore at the moment, because they're in the process of heavily rebranding into exclusivity. So, as to exclude whisky drinkers, mission accomplished. Back to Tamdhu. Good variety of options available. I probably recommend the non-age statement cask strength version, but it's not as available as this, the standard 12-year-old. The bottle, by the way, is not a traditional whisky bottle. This is a traditional French eau de vie or liqueur bottle. If you were at the auctions in Paris, you might see that this being used for absinthe. But it has been a very classic Art Deco stroke Art Nouveau bottle style. But it seems to work for Tamdhu. I'm not going to fret over that. I'm going to stick my nose in the glass and see what I'm getting and share it with you. If there's any peat influence at all, it's very, very restrained. This is very much a sherry monster, but not a sherry overcoat monster. This is a sherry dominant whisky, like you find with Glenfarclas, like you find with Aberlour, like you find with Macallan. It's a style of single malt that really seems to suit sherry, and you find this with Speyside distilleries with fat-necked, short-necked stills that tend to have big boiling pots. It's about the shape of the still. It basically creates a richer, textured single malt. Unfortunately, this distillery, they are not using worm tubs to cool, and therefore it's not as rich as it can be or should be. But never mind, let's move on with this review. The nose, distinctively, almost cliched sherry nose. Standard mid-sweet Oloroso, slightly nutty, resinous, lots and lots of raisins, and then more raisins with the raisins. There comes a point with your whisky journey that the novelty will wear off when it comes to sherry monsters, and you'll be yearning for the inclusion of spirit signature with the sherry. And in fairness, particularly as a 12-year-old whisky, you're getting that here. The style of Tamdhu is sort of baked apple, baked with raisins, plum notes. It's got that sort of thing going on. It's kind of got that richness of fruit characteristic that you get in sherried Glenlivets. It's slightly restrained, and inevitably it will be, because it's reduced to 43%, and chill filtration, which of course removes a little bit of flavour and natural colour from the whisky, hence the reason for adding some caramel industrial colourant. But if you're just new to whisky, frankly, you're not even going to notice. I'll tell you why. Because first taste is going to leave you with a positive initial impression. First taste, acetic, gingery, particularly ginger cake, bit of green ginger, big sherry stuff going on. You know, that kind of gooey, juicy sherry that you kind of get with PX, but not quite. So that's what's really going on. It kind of hits the tongue, a little bit sharp, a little bit abrasive, and then it passes on its merry way. The development is kind of similar to the arrival, and then the finish is short, sharp, a little bit hot ginger and tannins. This absolutely needs some water. Not a lot of water. It's already at 43%, so it's been already well diluted for you. But the problem is, when they dilute it at the bottling plant, they don't hold the flavour. The flavour evaporates with the dilution. You won't get that in the distillery tours. Nice little bit of fleeting visimetry or rippling within the liquor once they've added the water. It doesn't hang about. Yet another sign of industrial style chill filtration, which is pretty brutal and savage in its effect. But if you're new to whisky, or you're just an occasional buyer or buying someone a present who doesn't drink whisky anyway, then you're home and dry. Nice bottle, comes in a nice box with a see-through window. It ticks the boxes. Back to the nose. The nose, now we're getting a little bit more fresh fruit citrus. Lemon and lime citrus notes. Slightly resinous, slightly oily. Pine oil. Yeah, I think there's a bit of pine oil in there. So a slightly bit of sort of kind of conifer forest note. The sherry will have something to do with that. and a little bit of green herbaceous content, primarily soft juvenile sage. Maybe a little bit of thyme in there too. Back to the taste. Wonderfully richly fruity. We know it could be so much more, but if we're looking for that, we need the higher strength versions where the flavour has not been diluted down, and we also need to look for independent bottlings, because Tamdhu is now becoming a little bit more available from independent bottlers, thank goodness. In summing up, I think Tamdhu's got a great signature. It's been off the radar until the distillery recently changed hands and went into new ownership. The new owners being Ian MacLeod Distillers, who own Glengoyne and Rosebank. And these are distillers who are noted for making their whisky expensive. Really expensive. Particularly if you're buying at the distillery. So be careful with distillery visits. I'm sure you'll have a lovely distillery visit at Tamdhu. However, double check the prices in the shop before you buy, just as you would if you were visiting Glengoyne. They're eye-watering, some of the prices. Absolutely unjustifiable. But hey, it's business. Everything is only worth what someone somewhere will pay. And there's always someone who'll pay too much because they're not very bright. It's true. Back to the nose. A little bit more resinous now, a little bit more woody. The oak from the sherry cask is starting to have a little bit of activity in the malt, but it's just taking it in a slightly different direction. This whisky will, over the next 15 to 20 minutes, soften down, open up. It will become more engaging, a little bit kinder in the palate, but at the moment it's perfectly competent. As I was implying earlier in the video, this is one which has been under the radar for a while, but it's a bit of a modern cult classic. In that when the distillery rebranded under new ownership, there's some spectacularly good bottlings, because that's what distilleries tend to do, to get attention. You know, it's a sort of superstition in distilleries. If you ever have edition 1 or you're under new ownership and you're relaunching your product, make it absolute banger casks, because first impressions are big impressions, and that's business. It's the way the industry works, so always be on the lookout for that. It's now regarded by whisky aficionados as being more pragmatic, more honest, more available, more accessible and more reasonable than Macallan, which is true. I think now Tamdhu's got a better signature than Macallan, because Macallan is now being made in the new distillery, which in my opinion, it's not working. It's just my opinion, that's all it is. I know opinions will be cancelled at some point, but while we still can, I'm going to have an opinion and share it with you. Last taste before the malt mark. A delightful aromatic cough lozenge, cherry lozenge. You know these lozenges you take, the Swiss ones which have got a bit more authentic flavour, as cough sweets that don't numb your palate. That's the sort of whisky this is. It's got a lovely character, it really does. It's just strange. Tamdhu has been off my radar for a long time. In fact, throughout the history of my channel here at the Whisky Bothy, I've only reviewed Tamdhu 3 times in 16 years. So this is the 4th time But I do suspect it won't be too much longer before I review it again. I'm liking this style, the slightly meaty umami style, the kind of earthiness of it, warm earth, slight baked clay notes. Quite old-fashioned, but I like that style a lot. So this is me essentially reacquainting with this. How about's the malt mark? What will I give this? I'm enjoying it, but it is 43%. It is chill filtered. If it wasn't, it would be at least 2, maybe 3 more marks, but we're going to give it a very respectable 82 out of 100. If you pop back again for my extras, I'm going to be talking about my history, my personal history with Tamdhu, just to give you that perspective. I'll see you there. Bye-bye.